Hey everybody, welcome back to Back Log Banter. I'm your boy Abram, joined as always by Mr. Tucker Hazel, and we're here today for a very, very exciting video because we are here to talk about the first Switch 2 game that we've covered on the channel that we've actually played. Wait, that's not true because we played all those preview games. Including, one of the games you previewed actually was Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour.
Oh, whoa, look at that. It's Welcome Tour. That's my physical copy of Welcome Tour, you fucking people. Look, it's a real physical copy.
Well, I saw you reach for something. I didn't know if you're going to hold up the Switch or what you're going to do.
No. It's my physical copy of Welcome Tour. I just thought it'd be funny to have this. And it is.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
I'm happy.
Yeah, I just have I have a bunch of ones and zeros that were transmitted through the 5G coronavirus.
Technically, so do I, but I also have this piece of cardboard.
if you just say 5G coronavirus, do you get demonetized?
Is that like against TOS or something?
I don't know. I feel like sometimes you get like you see a video and it's like got like a Wikipedia.
Should I bleep that in post?
It says like Wikipedia coronavirus happened or whatever. To be clear, when this gets in the algorithm,
let me be clear.
At least one of us believes in the coronavirus.
It's a 50-50 shot.
Tucker, what are we talking about? We're talking about Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour.
Boom! Look at that.
So we both played it. We both.
Yeah.
You didn't come anywhere near 100%ing it, did you?
No, I don't care to, and also it's too hard.
We'll
talk about.
I obviously had all the stamps. I did all of the insight quizzes, and I would say I did 60% of the games, and I did almost all of the demos, the tech demos. So we just want to sit back and have a conversation that goes a little deeper than the price tag. Because I think that Welcome Tour is an extremely intriguing game that is worth more of a conversation than is it or is it not worth $10? Should it or should it not be packed in?
Correct.
Because I'm honestly, I don't really care on either of those points. Do you have anything you want to say on those fronts before we really get into it?
No, I mean the conversation has been worked through, and so the quick and breezy summarization of my thoughts on it are: visually and tonally, it feels like pack-in software. It feels like something that you should be able to go into a menu and find, and that's how you access it. As just a cool bonus that they worked into the software, that maybe it's a part of the UI experience or something like that, as a guide to sort of teach you about the new system that you got. But so that's my thoughts on it being a pack-in. I'm like, if it was a little bit goofy, if it looked a little bit goofier, if it had maybe a little bit more of a narrative or something, if it featured other Nintendo characters, maybe I wouldn't think there was a pack-in, but it looks like UI. The game looks like UI, and so I feel like it should be something in a menu. But on the pricing level, there's more than enough content here to justify spending maybe, I know this would be sacrilege, but maybe even more than $10. I think there is enough going on here in terms of something that feels distinct, that is interestingly educational, as we'll talk about. There's quite a bit of variety in these little mini games and demos and stuff that you have. I'm like, this is worth some money. This was not like something you slapped together in 30 minutes and then just dumped out for $10. Like, it doesn't feel like a cash grab. $10 for me feels like the perfect. Okay, you're spending something on it, but it's not too much to where it's still a decently appealing thing because it is very non-traditional. So I think it is worth money, but should have been a pack-in.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of feels like, I don't know how many people this resonate with in the audience, but like in the mid-2000s, you would like buy a toy and it would come with like a DVD and there'd be like little games on it. Like I remember when that like creepy looking 2007 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie came out, if you bought the toys, they would come with like a little DVD and you'd put that into your, I guess it'd be a CD-ROM. You'd put it into, your mom's big iMac. Yeah. And you could play like little kitschy flash games. Yeah. And they want you to buy more shit. It's
Abram, once Dev Dive hits those kind of devs, you know that we're finally home.
But I would have spent $29.99 on this game.
Sure. Yeah.
I also think that there is just like,
now I know we're new at this whole YouTube thing, but point your face at the microphone. That'll help.
Well, I'm opining. I'm looking up from sign for I'm looking for signs of God to give me my cues.
Yeah.
This is a very religious program. God speaks through me about Welcome Tour.
Yeah.
So the only other thing I'd say on like a higher level is like I think that there's broadly a sort of lack of understanding about why Wii Sports even was a pack-in game. Because,
yeah, that's true.
I mean, even in the modern era of Nintendo, the pack-in software has been uncommon at best. You know, Nintendo Land, for instance, wasn't a pack-in game. You had to buy the more expensive Bang. You had to buy the more expensive...
Quick Draw, bam!
There you go. You had to buy the more expensive Wii U bundle to get it. It was, as John Carter was saying, which is totally right, it is most closely... Holy fuck, he's gone. It's most closely like Mario Kart World. Mario Kart... not Mario Kart. See, Tucker's moving all over the place. It's got me feeling all askew.
I just felt it was relevant.
A little 1-2 switch motion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, Wii Sports was only a pack-in game because Reggie famously fought for it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even a pack-in game in all regions. And I think ultimately, like, this game... Because I have many thoughts on this, how this game, to me, Welcome Tour, is sort of emblematic of the current moment in Nintendo history and culture. Anyway, I think this game is very emblematic of this principle that Kit and Krista have talked about, the Nintendo Forecast has sort of analyzed, this idea that Nintendo really, really believes in the value of their work. And this very specific idea that giving away something for free is sort of a sign that you don't value it. Yeah, I believe it was Miyamoto, if I'm remembering correctly, who spoke about that, was asked about that. I'm trying to remember from some good Nintendo Forecast analysis from a while ago. But I think that this game is not great. I have a lot of issues with Welcome Tour, but I think it's extremely interesting insofar as it kind of represents this moment of Nintendo's philosophies and priorities. This thing that is really here to demonstrate the prowess of their hardware and sort of make you revel in that, but also appreciate you for it. Like, I think it's really interesting how the little people at the kiosks for the insight quizzes thank you for reading the insights and things like that. Yeah. I think the game is like so particular to this moment, to this hardware, and not obviously just because you're walking around it, but I think it's the philosophies underneath it that make it interesting to me.
Definitely, yeah, because this Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour is the 1-2 Switch or Nintendo Land or Wii Sports equivalent for the launch of Switch 2. And it's interesting that this is the only one of those three that is in no way a party game. And there's actually no... Well, you can do, like, two people each have a mouse Joy-Con, but, like, it's certainly not a marketed part of it, and it's a very small section of the overall game. And it shows that you're right about it representing the current... specifically Switch 2 era Nintendo, which we're still getting used to and barely we've barely been aware of because the era is just so new, where they're more tech focused than anything. This game is specifically about how much effort went into making the Switch 2 a really powerful and well considered piece of designed hardware, and that is what I find most compelling about this, and why at the end of the day it was, for me as someone who's a student of the industry and especially a passionate fan of Nintendo, why it was worth me spending my time on is because I feel like I understand Nintendo and their thought process and design influences on specifically a hardware level way better now than I did before. Specifically Nintendo of this era with, those three guys that came up on screen during the Direct who I wasn't familiar with before. That philosophy that goes into making a piece of hardware that is iterative rather than revolutionary and leans much more into high power and frame rate and more considered wider industry feedback than frankly Nintendo has been interested in for the last 20 years. You think about Wii and DS and Wii U and 3DS and even to some extent something like GameCube and N64. Each of those systems have some element to them that's like rejecting what the rest of the industry is doing. But Switch 2 is actually in some ways it's like the Breath of the Wild of video game systems, where it's very much Nintendo in terms of it being something that other people aren't really doing and having these interesting and unique hardware innovations. but it is incorporating feedback from the rest of the industry and following in some trends that bring them closer to parity with their peers. And that's what this game shows, is the process by which they went about making this piece of hardware that feels of the lineage, but there's a solid philosophical gap between Wii U and Switch, and now Switch 2, because it's designed for power and for feeling premium, which other Nintendo systems maybe didn't.
No, 100%. I mean, I've been saying a little bit that it feels like there's a strong continuity from GameCube to Switch 2. And I literally mean from GameCube to Switch 2, jumping over the systems in the middle. Because, and an interesting point of order there is that GameCube was the last system launched before Iwata became president, and Switch 2 is the first system to launch without any sort of guidance from him. Obviously, he sadly passes before Switch 1, but was very heavily important to how that system came together. And GameCube was very powerful. It was held back by the mini discs, but in certain technical dimensions, it was the leader of that generation. And Switch 2 is not in that exact same position, but it sort of is underscored by similar philosophies. And I agree with you. I think the stuff about Welcome Tour that I found the most interesting was when we were getting into the real minutia, not just saying like, oh, you know, isn't it cool that this system is like capable of higher refresh rates or things like that. It's like when they said, the one that sticks with me is like, it's about the strap on the Joy-Con too, and they're talking about like the intricate stitching pattern to make sure
that was
that
crazy.
It doesn't rip apart with use. And I think
actually, why don't we just take a second to point out some of these things that were so interesting to us, primarily from the insight quizzes and these little like, I don't know, like little cork boards that like you have to go up and read from that teach you a little bit about the system. And there's a number of them where I was genuinely surprised. And I'm not an engineer, I'm not a hardware designer. And so again, this game actually taught me things about what it's like to make these systems. One of the ones that really jumps out to me is that they designed the Switch 2 dock to have one of the feet that was slightly different, because just that little extra bit of plastic and rubber changes the way that it balances, so that if you're pulling the dock out or you're plugging in a cord, it's not going to tip over. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, my brain is like, you make the dock and it sits there. But obviously, for the people that are going through iteration upon iteration and every possible mold and every possible permutation, you land on these little things of like testing the minute like milligram balance of each of these things. And this game goes into that detail. And it's a fascinating balance to where there's a lot of stuff in here that I felt like I could have just completed the quizzes without reading the stuff. I'm like, all right, I know what this is, especially if it's about Nintendo history. I'm like, okay, I know when this stuff was introduced. I know when the first cartridge systems they did were the first, times they tried 3D or frame rates or whatever. But then there was this extra layer where things like that thing about the dock or the ways that like the speakers have to be angled a certain way to make it actually feel louder, and they're not pointing forward, it has to point away from the other internal parts. I'm like, whoa, like a lot of effort went into making this when you're holding it in your hand, it feels like very similar to the Switch. But the reality is, almost every part was reconsidered from the ground up, and there would be no way of knowing that unless they had this piece of software that went into the nitty-gritty detail about every little piece of the system. The tiny little 1.5 millimeter gap between the Joy-Con, because between the Joy-Con and the system, because if that wasn't there, then they'd be easier to break off. And you're like, holy shit! Like, that's the level of consideration that went into making this.
Yeah, I think the all of the points really about the connection between the Joy-Con and the system were really fascinating to me. The gap between them is really interesting. The way that the magnets pop out a little bit on the SLSR buttons to make the connection point with the system is really interesting. I think the other one that stood out a lot to me was when you're inside the system, talking about how there's like a little bit of water in there, in like the heat sink or in
the tube,
in the tube. I was like, how the fuck is that possible? How is there water?
Yeah, exactly.
Do I have to add more water in there at some point? but this is where I'm also a little torn on the game, because I think that I think that the method of conveying this information is not especially good.
Sure. Yeah. It's just not it's just not fluid. Like you feel like you're at school.
you feel like you're at school, but I also think like
this game does not surprise and delight.
No, and I also don't even. I think that like its approach to education, quote unquote, is a little bit suspect.
Yeah,
because essentially you're just like,
in comparison to something like this.
Well, exactly. Actually,
Big Brain Academy. No, but I bring this up for a specific reason. Is because this. I mean, here's the thesis of the video.
Okay.
This is the most touch generations coded game that has been released in the last 15 years. For those of you who aren't familiar, during the Wii and DS era, there was this label of Nintendo games called touch generations games, which were ones that were games that were more software minded and more supposed to be open to people that are not particularly experienced with game design. There's not a lot of challenge. There's not a lot of levels. There's not a lot of mechanics. They're much more about replicating things from real life, like True Swing Golf or cooking software or something like Big Brain Academy that's supposed to just teach you, or this Flash Focus. Like I bring up these games because as someone who is familiar with touch generations, it was fascinating to be revisiting a game in the modern day that recaptures some of the sensibilities where this is not on a broad level a technically demanding game. It is educational software that happens to have these little hardware-minded mini games, but tech demos that are really there to, as in like educational parlance, reinforce with hands-on interactivity. It's like making the planets out of clay or whatever in school, or making the paper airplane in physics class. That's what the demos and the mini games of this game are reinforcing what they've just taught you. You get the quiz, and then they give you the little hands-on thing to have it like stick in your brain a little bit better.
Yeah, well, I think just my issue with it though is I don't think that you're not really learning in the sense that you're not you basically need to read these insights and have them stick in your short-term memory long enough
to definitely true.
Answer 3 to 5 questions about them and move on. And I think that the game, because a big criticism against the game, let me shift gear a little bit. Big criticism against the game is that it feels like a blatant advertisement. And I think that's definitely true. There's no doubt about it. Especially you were sharing an example with me of Dialogue. Where it was about the wheels.
We'll talk about that in a little bit.
But so the game can feel like an advertisement, and I think that the fact that it does and doesn't really try to teach you is illustrative of that. I wish that there was a more meaningful a way of teaching in this game. I think that the demos do it best when you're not the mini games, specifically the demos. When you go into these rooms and you're not really playing a game, you're really manipulating the hardware, and they're giving you little insights. They're saying, try this out, see what happens when you press this button. Notice how as you press X in the HD Rumble 2 sound demo, and you hear the frequency change, you hear what's going on. Like that feels like some better teaching than just read these like static cliff notes about a particular thing, and then retain it just long enough to jump over here and answer questions.
That's the interesting part about the quiz structure of this game. It is the quiz, which is the part that is probably supposed to be the most engaging and would be the most engaging to most people. It's like, okay, I'm actually thinking about this. I'm trying to answer these questions and pick between these answers. That is the much shorter part out of the educational experience, because you're going to sit there and you're going to read through 5 to 10 slides times 3 to 5 for each of these sections, and they go very in depth. And again, as someone who was going to this for an educational side, I thoroughly read and decently, to whatever degree that is, enjoyed reading through the notes.
Same.
But then the quiz part felt like, you blink and it's over. And I would say mostly just because I was clicking through and sometimes not paying attention, I probably only didn't pass a quiz 3 times out of the 40 or something in the game, maybe even more than that. So it was very rare, and I ended up feeling like I was on autopilot because the quizzes are also they're brain dead easy in a lot of places. They have like these little ratings of like, okay, how difficult is like a particular topic going to be, and I found those to be usually pretty accurate.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's like, all right, what frame rate does the Switch 2 allow for? 1, 2, 3, or 120. And then it's like, and so like usually the answers are 2 really stupid ones that are sometimes even a joke, or one that's like kind of close if you're not paying attention, and then one that's the correct answer. And so that sort of balance that is where it's obviously not challenging in a good chunk of it is something that I really don't know how to weigh the like design intent behind, because this is also educational software for children as well. And so I got to think about this from the fact of like, okay, I know what the right Joy-Con is, and I know that this is the up button or whatever, and I know the idea of how you can click in the right stick for it to do things, but there is an aspect to this where I do need to like think outside of myself and be like, I don't know a lot about designing hardware, and I don't know a ton about how it works literally. I mean, I know a lot more now that I've played this game, but I know 200 times more about this stuff than most people that own a video game system. Well, and so this software has to be educational to the lowest common denominator of people that are playing games, and so it has to be easy enough for people to actually feel like they're making progress and moving through it, so you're not stuck on the fucking Joy-Con R area before you actually learn like the more in-depth stuff about the software.
Well, I mean, I think that's why this is a strange product, because I don't think that kids would care at all.
No, absolutely not.
Like, because the other thing is like you have to have and this sounds dumb, but you have to have a basic like reading ability to play this game, and not just like, oh, can you find the start button?
They talk about fucking like elements and stuff in this. Yeah, like, you probably need to be at least in late middle school to actually be able to comprehend what this game is teaching you.
Yeah, and it's like if you're like 12, you're just gonna play Mario Kart, or you're gonna play Fortnite, or you're not gonna play Welcome Tour. And so they
have to design it so that if those kind of kids play it, then they're able to understand it. So it doesn't serve anyone's purpose exactly. It only partially serves. It partially serves everyone's purpose, but doesn't fulfill any of them completely. Meaning that for most people that play this, they're going to be left feeling unfulfilled by it, because it feels like it's not actually angled at any one particular demographic.
So this actually, I have one major complaint of the game.
All right, let's do it.
And that is that there, as far as I can tell from my time and from doing a little research online, this game has no credits.
Yeah.
And now this, to me, is a massive issue, because I think that the script of this game is very interesting, because it often feels like I am dialoguing directly with somebody from within Nintendo.
Sure.
Who worked on the hardware. So the 3 guys you were mentioning before are Koichi Kawamoto, Takahiro Doda, and Tetsuya Sasaki. They are the various directors and producers of the Switch 2 hardware. They're the ones from the April showcase. They're the ones who did a roundtable with the press in New York. They're the ones who did the Acid Developer column.
Yeah.
They care deeply about the hardware, and it often feels like I'm being talked to by one of them. We designed the hardware this way. Thank you for taking opportunity to read our insights. Like this is a personal script, but it's also very impersonal, because these are like abstractions of people, and we don't actually know who we're speaking to. We don't know who the script writer of this game is. And I think that that's a real shame, when it feels like this game is trying to get you to be in closer conversation with the hardware and with the achievement of the hardware, but you don't know or even get a sense of who those people that did the achievement are.
Yeah, and that is very much, again, indicative in some ways, but indicative in part of the current era of Nintendo.
Yeah.
Where I agree that from our point of view as hardcore Nintendo fans that are that are also very interested in making sure that we see the faces behind and are familiar with the faces and the minds behind this software, that we're angling for that we want to know the people that are making this so that we understand that conversation a little bit better. But the goal of this software is not for you to get to know the people behind it. It is for you to get a chance to talk to Nintendo, the company that makes the hardware. Like, this is Nintendo talking to its fans, not... I mean, it literally is the people that are writing the script, but this game is positioned, and whether or not this is the intent of not having credits easily accessible, if at all in the game, to obfuscate that, the game is very much designed from the Nintendo point of view rather than from the particular developer's point of view.
I mean, you're certainly right, but I just think that that's bad.
Yeah.
Because it's not even like I don't need the person behind the Insight desk to be Kawamoto. You know?
Yeah, of course.
Even if I just got to the end, I finished the stamp rally and the credits roll, and I see, written by Kawamoto, Dota, and that's it. Like, even if I just know that, that's all I'm looking for. I don't need them to massively change the intent of the game. And I broadly think, I think that the narrative that Nintendo is sort of trying to become reclusive or monolithic is true and isn't. But
exactly. That's why I have to. Yeah.
But I think
because they are actually opening up a lot more in the last few months than they had in the Switch era with all these asset developer interviews. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah, in the last 2 years, they've been way more open to interviews, both internal and external. Even though the external ones are slimmer, new faces and directs, etc. Like they are opening up in some ways, but I think to have this game have absolutely no credits is really a shame. Because there's also one line of dialogue that really caught my interest. There is this old lady who shows up every set X number of insight quizzes you pass, and she'll give you a little insight. And at one point, she gave an insight about the UFO game, and said that this game was made by a staff member who loves Bullet Heaven games.
Sure. Yeah.
This is like the dialogue. You don't know who that staff member is, but it's very clear that this is not a fictional person. This is a real person inside, presumably EPD4, who presumably made this game, who loves shmups and made ostensibly a shmup game. Yeah. And I think it's just so frustrating for me, looking for ways. You were talking about how this game services kind of nobody. I think there's little ways that we could have serviced more people, spoken more to us if the script had a little bit more clarity about who we're talking about. Because even I agree with you that the intent is for this to just be Nintendo as a monolith speaking to you about the hardware. But they've also gone to lengths, again, in the direct, at the hands-on events, and in the Ask Developer interview, to assign specific names to the hardware. And this game is also, more so than any Touch Generations game that I can think of, really, interested in representing Nintendo hardware as though you're meeting it in real life. Like you are walking past Switch 2 advertisements in this fictional location. Like this is...
Even to the point where, and this is the thing that was most surprising to me of this, and how clear it was to me that this is something that Nintendo has thought about for a long time, prepping for Switch 2, is that the desks that the people are at that are giving you information are literally designed the exact same way as the intro desks at the in-person event that we went to.
Yes.
Like it's the same oblong red thing with the Switch 2 logo and the white desktop on the top. And I was like, oh shit. Like, I don't know how long this specific game was in development or how long they were thinking about what the in-person events or maybe the Nintendo San Francisco store was going to look like. But clearly, there is one design ethos circulating through all of these projects. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's an information desk somewhere at one of the Nintendo parks that is similar in design to this.
Or the museum.
Oh, especially the museum, where it's like the banners are the same. And so and it's obviously like what came first, I don't really know, but one person had this idea and made sure that it was going, or one person or a team obviously was informing the visual design language of this game in a digital space, but also for a very select number of people, informing the design language of the actual Switch 2 experiences that they had around the world.
I mean, we talk a little bit about how like Donkey Kong Country Returns HD has a very clear harmony with that park in terms of very, very similar key art in the same style. Obviously, the park is based around the aesthetic of Returns. Yeah. But what you're pointing to is an even deeper synergy between these very discrete types of Nintendo experiences. This game experience, this...
Well, in terms of like where they sit in the world, yes, but thematically, they're basically the same.
That's a good point.
I mean, this is a digitized version of the Switch 2 experience that we went to. Obviously, we got to play a variety of games there, but on like an introducing you to Switch 2 hardware level and having all of the, like for us, it was all the different parts of the launch hardware in like little glass cases you could go and look at, and them teaching you how to like take the magnets on and off. This is the digitized version of that exact experience.
Well, I mean, even your point about the stores are interesting, right? Because this aesthetic for the stores has been around for a while in Japan, in particular. Yeah. And then it came here with the San Francisco store. But even if you think of this game as an advertisement, and we might as well talk a little bit about this now, the very ham-fisted dialogue, it functions in a similar way to a store as well in terms of
absolutely.
Walking across the camera or the Pro Controller or the wheel is the most egregious part of the whole thing, in my view. Because the wheel has got use in like one use case. Yeah. Maybe you can use the wheel with Kirby Air Riders, I don't know. Or the new Excite bots they're definitely making. There is a commercial function to the game for sure. Yeah. And I don't take that as the issue that I think some people do, but it is definitely very awkward.
It's personally my biggest issue from connecting to the game.
Sure.
Because it makes me feel the business reality of this. I think aesthetically and writing wise, those are the two biggest, like, oh, this is a fucking business move to make this game. And that is one of the things that Nintendo is usually pretty good about, is obfuscating that in some way of, every game they make is a business decision in some way. But this game having the very impersonal dialogue that it has, or, well, the attempt to be personal and fall flat on its face dialogue that it has, where it feels like trained PR responses. Every person you go up and talk to either is just telling you tidbits about Switch 2, which makes the people, which are like basically little like almost chess pieces, like they're very like simplistic, minimalistic designed characters, very much like what people will complain about the oversimplification of like logo design, or like like the default Google stock art of like digitized people that they have that feel they would be a cool aesthetic if it wasn't so overutilized and integrated into a massive brand. That's what this game feels like, and the dialogue is a big example of that, where either the people are just telling you like, oh hey, did you know the Switch 2 can do this? I'm like, okay, well that's actually kind of the exact same as what the rest of the game is fucking telling me. So why'd I bother talking to this person? Or they have this really corny and, as you mentioned, ham-fisted dialogue that's like, oh boy, I sure love Nintendo. Oh man, Switch 2 is so fucking cool, man. Like, oh, I'm just obsessed with it, and I can't wait to play it, and I want to slobber on it, and I want to use it as a sexual partner, and I'm like, get the fuck out of here. Like, it feels like, number one, no one's actually saying any of this, and when you put it in your own fucking game that you're selling with the system, it's like you're imagining the best case scenario of what your like biggest dick sucking Nintendo fan is going to say about your hardware.
I mean, we come close to saying that, but we're allowed to say it's different.
Yeah, but we say it with curse words and stuff, so it's cool and edgy.
Yeah, we say it by like making like weird jokes.
Yeah.
They should imagine if we got to write all the dialogue for the game.
Oh man. Yeah. That'd definitely be for a target audience.
Like, you gave me the example of the girl who's like, man, I can't wait to ask for a Joy-Con 2 steering wheels for Christmas. Or whatever.
That's never gonna happen! Fuck you, Nintendo! I think I just peeked my microphone, but I don't care.
Well, and this is, again, it goes back to your point about audience, right? I think this game functions best if you are like us and you have an acute interest in these minute details. And to be clear...
Yeah, exactly.
I'm on the whole, I enjoyed my time with the game because I did want to learn these things. But like our friend Logan Plant, who previewed the game for IGN, like after his preview, I had messaged him and he messaged me back saying like I am the target for Welcome Tour. I am the target audience, and I went into the game with that context, and I just feel like there is a version of this game that could have been quite special if it had a clearer target in mind. And it's also
it's interesting because you say that, but I also think that it's in some ways, if it had a broader target in mind, where if this software or this ethos of education and getting familiar with the hardware was presented through a more traditionally appealing Nintendo design ethos, I think a lot of people would be much more willing to give it a shot. And this comes to the other point I was making about it feeling very corporate, is it's got the cold, vapid, like you're entering into the Google headquarters lobby. Like you're like, it feels like everyone's like a secretary. And that's from the aesthetic, right? Is everything is like blank white and no faces on anything, and like stark colors, and you can only move the camera at like 4 specific angles. It feels very rigid and very designed and very impersonal. And there are moments within that are kind of cool, like ice skating around on the screen or something. Like, okay, there's a little bit of personality there, or climbing down into the Joy-Con on a ladder. I'm like, all right, that's kind of fun. But for the most part, the visual design language of this game hampers me from being like immersed in it, because I feel like I'm being sold to while I'm playing the game. I feel like I'm at a corporate event where everyone is trained to make sure that I know this about the system so that I buy it.
It's I think I was thinking a lot about Nintendo. Well, I think a lot about Nintendo Land all the time, but I was especially thinking about it while playing, because Nintendo Land, I mean, even just look at the cover, right? It functions in a very similar way. It is
it definitely does.
Very aware of the hardware, and it's this more abstracted, quote unquote, real place. In that case, you're walking around a theme park. I feel like that game does as much to teach you about the Wii U hardware as this game does, obviously. In a less concrete way, but to some degree, I think in a way that's more meaningful, because while I appreciate the insights and it's given, and it's the sort of thing that like I would have read that on Nintendo.com, right? So to play through it is exciting and learn things that way. But
it definitely feels like they turned 50 active developer interviews into a game, and they didn't really do much beyond that.
but I think like what does this really materially mean for a gaming experience? And when I play Nintendo Land, or when I play 1-2 Switch, and you're seeing these
or if I could hold my Astro's Playroom up here,
like you're seeing in a gameplay context why all this stuff is amazing. Maybe you're not learning exactly how the sensors in the IR camera on the Joy-Con R works during the sandwich eating minigame, but by doing the sandwich eating minigame, you are learning by doing, and you're coming to understand how that hardware works. And so I think that a better aesthetic, or at minimum a more interesting hook than this would have helped. Like, leave this aesthetic if you want, but don't set it, as you're saying, which I think is perfectly accurate, in this corporatized feeling environment.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I mean, I just wish it was more the Switch 2 is a party. Look at all this cool stuff we do. Like, I wish if there was like balloons and confetti and like different visually themed areas, like if the Joy-Con 2 was, or if the Pro Controller was like in a mountain area or something like that, you went to it and it was this big a Pro Controller 2 shaped mountain that you had to like climb up, and like all the people were like in like little parkas or something like that, and so they're like, oh man, like and maybe that's like, you know, the rumble's so powerful it's like an earthquake or something. Like if there were these little bit of, if there's a little bit of fantasy to it, I think it would feel a little bit more inviting. And to the point we were making earlier about surprising and delighting, and that inherently having some educational underpinning, people are more likely to want to learn something if they're having fun while doing it. And this game strikes a really awkward balance because they do what you're saying, where there are these sections like the demos you mentioned and the mini games where you have to use all the different parts of the hardware. And I also want to talk about that, how broad this game is, and it's like it's not just Switch 2 hardware on the like system itself. Obviously, it's the dock and the different controllers and the camera and the wheels and everything that you could possibly buy at launch. Let's transition to that, because one of the other interesting things about this game that I think is secretly a good strength of it is how much it leans into every possible facet of the Switch 2.
Yeah.
And something that people have been complaining about is that in order to actually 100% this game and experience all of it, you have to spend something like close to $700 in Switch 2 hardware and peripherals and additional controllers and fucking camera and wheels and all of this, and the wheels that you probably won't even use that many times, and an extra pro controller to actually do all of it, because there are mini games and demos and things that need the back paddles. There are things that you need the camera for, but I like that because it shows that they really want to go super in depth, and that's what I like about this game is those little minute details of I was mentioning, like little plastic bits and like balancing of metal coating and things that like really educate me on the amount of effort that went into all of this. Having a section for the camera and teaching me how they really designed the camera, and they like made the cord out of a different material so that it would be able to bend a little bit easier. Like having that kind of detail here makes me appreciate the entirety of the Switch 2's launch hardware and peripherals in a way that no other company would be in any way willing to commit to that level of exploration of their own work.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the other thing is that the 100% thing is just, I think it's silly. I think it's a silly point of discussion because there's no gating behind beating a particular minigame.
No.
So what I mean to say is, it's not like you get to the camera portion, and if you can't do the camera games, you can't pass. And even if you want to simply have all the boxes checked, you can get, I think they're called like skip medals or something.
Yeah, pass medals.
Yeah. And you have to do like SOS and Morse code, and then they pass you, which is kind of cute with the controller. But I agree with you. I think that what Welcome Tour did, not only in terms of giving me a greater appreciation for these really nuanced bits of the hardware design and engineering, is it was demonstrating to me how exciting the future of the library can be if we get the right teams, namely EPD4 in a more gamified product, but then also intelligent systems with WarioWare. Because I think two of the mini games that really stick out to
Switch 2 WarioWare is going to go fucking wild.
I really hope it does. I really hope they really use everything, because like I one of my favorite mini games, and I actually showed this to my dad because when I was home last week, and I obviously my dad knew the system would come out and he wanted to know about it. So I actually just opened up Welcome Tour and showed him a bunch of the different games and stuff so he could get it. And one of the ones that I showed him that was the most amazing to me and also to him is the one that uses the gyroscope in the system itself to calculate the angle of the kickstand.
Dude, I can't even believe that's possible. Like when I was doing that, I'm like,
yeah.
I mean, okay, conceptually I understand why the gyroscope. No, are you sure it's the gyroscope and not the? I thought it was like there's like some sort of sensor like in here that calculates the angle.
Well, this is a testament to the weakness of the quiz structure, because I don't really remember.
It definitely tells us that.
Yes, so it happens. and again, this is the thing. I have to learn the information to repeat it back in a quiz 30 seconds later. But the point is, that was amazing to me. Find the strongest point of rumble was amazing to me. Like, this hardware is equipped with so many things that can be applied if you want to apply them, and I just hope that people do, because how many developers are really going to implement this stuff? But I would love to see all the different sensors and all the different applications of them actually get used.
And what, again, this game did a good job at doing was making me appreciate how innovative the Switch 2 actually is and how different it is than the Switch 1. We have had quite a few conversations on this channel about about how it's different and what that will allow for Nintendo to do. And there was a lot of stuff in here that I knew on like a surface level was possible with Switch 2, but really being able to be familiarized with it on like on a deeper level made me excited about Absolutely. Like, oh no, like Switch 2 actually does have a lot that is simply possible with the amount of detail and variety that the hardware is capable of, that Switch 1 couldn't do. And so like I'm very happy that this is the next step, right? And I'm excited to see what design possibilities come out of this. And Switch 2 or Welcome Tour, Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour to be specific, helped to show me that in a way that you and I are always like, man, we love it when Nintendo leans into their hardware and unique control things and leaning into even peripherals, right? Using peripherals to do innovative and different kinds of game design. That's what this is at the end of the day.
Well, and that's why I am on the whole positive about this game. You know, it's not. It's, to be clear, it's not a glowing recommendation.
No.
But I think the reasons that I feel critical on these certain aspects is because I could see how this could have been more ultimately.
Yeah. Because it also does, to your point of it feeling like there could be more, it feels low budget. I mean, everything that I was mentioning about how minimalistic and simplistic the art style is, to the fact that you can't freely rotate the camera, like all of these things like make it feel kind of cheap.
Well, they also like even reuse graphics in the insight quizzes sometimes. Like there's this one about 60 versus 120 frames a second, and they use the same graphic of like slotting in new panels of a person walking to show added frame rate. So I agree with you completely. I think you can feel that this was made quickly.
Yeah, which is interesting. And if this had been, which again, not that I didn't expect that EPD4 doesn't have another game in development, but I would say that this was something that a team whipped together in a pretty short amount of time, which means that we're going to be getting other projects from this experimental internal team probably pretty soon.
Well, this is my other thing, and I said this on Blue Sky, but there's a conspiracy theory part of me that doesn't even think EPD4 made this game.
Yeah.
Because one of the things you learn from the Asset Developer interview is that these guys who are at the top of the hardware development come from teams like EPD4. I don't think it's impossible that this was made by the internal hardware team. These people that used to be only software and now are on the hardware side. You could see a world where these guys who are really acutely aware of the hardware because it's their own hardware put this project together in 6 months together with a small group of guys. And maybe EPD4.
Yeah, they get a couple of artists or musicians from one of the other teams. Yeah. And I think that's actually very possible, just given how different this game feels. It feels, frankly, it doesn't feel like the team that had fun even designing MC Horse Show Pony made Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, because EPD4, even in their like more comparatively drier corporate games like Game Builder Garage and Nintendo Labo, have funny little characters with unique character designs that are a part, like Jump Rope Challenge is the like simplest game that Nintendo's ever made, and even that has frankly better music than this and more unique art style. And so like I do think you're right that it feels like it came from, or like I just played the Climate Station game from PlayStation, that is this exploration of climate change technology and data research from the last 10 years. And that's not made by Insomniac or Santa Monica. It's made by the SIE Europe team that they just, I mean, obviously no technology, and so they had a team that could make this. This is that equivalent where it's like, maybe this is just like a section of that team that was able to make, or there's like some of this stuff that happened on like Wii U and Wii that was like this things that were kind of software and kind of not, that certainly weren't games necessarily, that came from not EPD4. It came from like these people that are in the product designing team,
like Wara Wara Plaza and various things. There's been a lot of that stuff on Wii U and 3DS. This is even the sort of thing that like I wonder if NST could have worked on. You know, I don't know. I having really gone through it, I think it feels
too politely Japanese for me.
No, that honestly, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. I was just thinking like, because like Nerd and various people have made like emulators. There's always weird amalgams of people and teams that could be working on little stuff like this. But I just having gone through it now, I think it was an easy conclusion to draw that EPD4 made it, because obviously this type of information is very similar to the type of information, particularly in the garage component of Labo. But I just don't know. I think that, as you were saying, EPD4's games always have an identity. Even if that identity, like there's a continuity in art design between Labo and Game Builder Garage, and there are characters, even if they're a little bit simple guys, they're characters. Even 1-2 Switch has a lot of character, and that's real people, right? So I just wouldn't be surprised if in actuality they're working on some kind of Ring Fit analogous full body fitness game with this hardware, or they're working on the next Switch sports game. And they didn't actually make this. Maybe that's just copium, because we both really like EPD4 and obviously want to see something from them ASAP. But they're such a prolific team anyway that even if they did do Welcome Tour, they'd have another game next year, right? So, I don't know. I feel mixed on Welcome Tour, I think, on the whole. But I'm glad that I gave it a fair shake, because I was almost just going to skip it entirely.
I remember you mentioned that. I am definitely positive on it, not necessarily as an experience that I would recommend to people, because I probably wouldn't, to be honest. But because I like when Nintendo does weird shit. And I remember saying this in our reaction and then our discussion afterwards is like, but you want Nintendo to do weird shit? This is the prime example of that. And that doesn't mean it's great, but it slots into this. I'm more interested and obsessed with the Touch Generations era than most people, of like, they made multiple cooking software games. Like, that's, if I want that energy to be recaptured, it is through something like this. It just, again, as we mentioned at the very beginning of this, Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour is actually the game out of anything they've announced so far, or anything on the software, that represents the current Nintendo business ethos and design ethos.
Sure.
Like, it is perfectly aligned with the tenor of their experiences and their business and their hardware focus and things like that. And so I'm very glad that I played it. I'm glad that I'm like deeply familiar with it, because I gave it a thorough analysis, because it helps me understand current Nintendo better.
Definitely.
In a way that I'm not sure many of these games, until we get further into Switch 2, we get an understanding of what the library is really like. We've only played, as of now, 2 of their games. What the Switch 2 era is really gonna be like. I feel like I got like a peek behind the curtain that most people aren't gonna like understand what Switch 2 era energy is going to be. Like, this was like a booster shot of like, ooh, all right, I feel like I've got some information to work with here.
Yeah, and I think that both its strengths and its weaknesses demonstrate that point.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I agree with you. I think it'll be really interesting to see if we end up getting more games that feel this way, or I guess more aptly, more software that feels this way. The only thing I can think of that is like anyway recent, quote unquote, is Kawashima's Brain Training on Switch, which is a very dry game. And also uniquely, it's funny because that game, like, in some ways uses the Switch hardware better than any other game, with like the touchscreen and especially the IR camera. But that game is, we're not here to review Kawashima's Brain Training. The point is, it'll be really fascinating to see.
I played that every day for almost a month.
It's interesting. It's very interesting.
Yeah, and now I don't have access to it anymore because Nintendo stole your games from me.
This is true. Because you were gonna keep playing that every day for the rest of your life.
I don't know, man. I like being able to pop things in every once in a while, you know.
But I think we've said everything we have to say about Welcome Tour.